At the end of the season, it's a good time to try and look through the garden, find those perfectly ripe tomatoes, and pull those out to use in a tomato sauce. Today I'm going to do one that I learned to cook in Italy, where I was recently very fortunate to travel. So I'm going to do it as much as I can as they do it there, but we're going to have to make some adaptations for the U.S. I'm going to start with about a tablespoon of olive oil. And to that I'm going to add one slice of thick sliced bacon. Now in Italy they would use pancetta, very hard to come by here, and if you can come by it, it's fairly expensive. Now I'm using both because I want to get the richness of having the fat there, but I don't want to have it all come from animal fat. So we're using a combination here, and this will infuse some of that flavor into the olive oil. We're not going to drain the fat away from that though. We're going to go ahead and keep the fat, whatever comes out of the meat as well, and we're going to let that cook until it gets translucent and starts to turn golden. As you can see, the bacon is starting to brown a little bit, and so I'm going to add a chopped onion. This is about half a cup or a little bit more. This is sort of like making a salad when you're making a sauce like this, because it allows you to be a little bit flexible with your ingredients, and if you wanted to add some mushrooms at this time, you could also. I'm also going to add 5 cloves of minced garlic. So we're going to get a lot of flavor from this, and we're going to let this just cook briefly. We want the onion to start to become translucent. We don't want time enough for the garlic to burn it all. So this is just going to be a brief cook at this point in time. To this, I'm adding 5 or 6 tomatoes. Now these, because I'm trying to do it more the traditional method, I actually peeled them and also seeded them, because in this kind of sauce in Italy you wouldn't find any tomato seeds. Now that doesn't mean I threw that away, because that's very nutritious part of the tomato, but what I did do is put it in a container and saved it for soup or some other purpose later on. In fact, when you do this, if you don't have enough for soup, which you probably wouldn't from one batch of sauce, you can actually put it into the freezer and just keep adding to it until you have enough various sundry ingredients. You can even save the tomato peels and use it to make stock later on, and then just strain it through. I'm also going to add to this somewhere between 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup of red wine. And we're going to bring this to a simmer, and the last ingredient I'm going to add right now is about 8 basil leaves that have been chopped up. These are fresh basil leaves, and if at all possible, do use the fresh ones, because they give you a whole different flavor profile than the dried ones do. If you're going to use the dried ones, you could do that in the pinch in the dead of winter when the tomatoes aren't fresh either, but this time of year, go for the fresh. This is going to come to a simmer, and you're going to let it simmer 40 to 50 minutes, depending on how thick you want it, how much time you have, how much of that deep flavor you want to develop. The sooner you eat it, you could eat it now if you chose to, once it's warmed up and come to a simmer, but it's going to be a totally different concept as far as the flavor profiles than you'll get if you let it cook for a long time. It's great on many kinds of pasta. You could also serve it on crostini or dry toast. What I've done with it is put it on spaghetti, because that's one of the traditional ways. Also on top of it, I put some shredded Parmesan cheese. You can stir a little bit of that into the sauce also as it's finishing up at the very end of cooking. You also should check it at this point to decide whether it needs any seasoning like salt or pepper. Because you're putting the Parmesan on and it has a lot of salt, it's best to wait until you actually get that combination going to make that determination on salt, because otherwise you may end up with it being too salty. Also, you don't want to add salt early on in the simmering process, because it's going to concentrate as it goes on down and continues to cook. Again, this was a great meal to remind me of the wonderful time I had in Italy, but I think you will find this to be just a great meal in Oklahoma anytime you've got some good fresh tomatoes and fresh basil. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.